What's up, everybody? This is the Tied to the Land podcast, where we believe that everybody is tied to the land in some way, shape, or form. On this podcast, we'll explore the intimate connection that people feel with the land beneath their feet, while telling the stories of folks whose lives have been impacted by their roots to the rural lifestyle. This podcast is brought to you by Arrowhead Land Company, where their mission is to create, inspire, or advance a connection to the land in every person throughout the world. What's up, guys? My name's Andrew Schultz. This is the Tied to the Land podcast, and we've got a good friend of mine, co-worker, associate, Steve Noble in the house. What's going on, Steve?
Hey, what's up, Andrew? TG's in there, I know, and Arrowhead Land Company community and the Tied to the Land podcast community. What is up, everybody? What a beautiful afternoon coming at you from Southern Iowa.
Southern Iowa, what's the weather like there today?
Hey, it's overcast, but we've had a little bit of rain, and temperatures are very steadily climbing, and farmers are getting antsy. I saw a lot of planters parked in the field today. I was on my way to an auction, and guys are ready to rock and roll. So it's always beautiful in Southern Iowa, Andrew.
No doubt, no doubt. These farmers, they had a long winter maybe, and they're ready to go now.
Yeah, they are. And, back in the day when people were taking their John Deere 7000 6-row planter, and, they'd have to get started pretty early, and they'd wait for just, the word go, and they were in the field because it took them a long time. But that planter I saw today was the size of about 4 school buses put together. They wait for the optimal time to plant, and it doesn't take them long. They can rip out a lot of ground. So
that's awesome.
They're anxious to go.
That's awesome. So Steve, tell everybody about yourself. First and foremost, you as a person, and we're going to get into your journey a little bit. So I don't want you to dive too far into details. We'll keep it surface level for now, but maybe how you came across Arrowhead Land Company and what you're doing now. So tell everybody about that.
Yeah, sure. I'm born and raised in Deckerville, Michigan. So Deckerville's in the thumb of Michigan. Like I said, I was born and raised there. It was 9 years ago that I decided to pick up and move my family here to Southern Iowa. But, I was born in a farming community out there. I did a lot of hunting and fishing and enjoying the outdoors and things of that nature. In school, I got really active in sports and weightlifting and baseball and football and basketball. So it kept me pretty active. After high school, I really didn't know what the heck I was going to do. And so I decided I was going to be a biology major. And I think it was about a week away from actually reporting to a university. I ended up at Northern Michigan University in Marquette, Michigan, which, I don't think they lose snow up there in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan until probably middle of July. But I did a couple visits. And I'm like, okay, I gotta decide where I'm going to go. And I remember packing the car up and heading to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and was in my dorm room one night, and it was orientation, and I had a skateboard, snowboard guy as a roommate. I'm like, man, I'm not quite feeling at home, and I got a phone call about 10 p.m. on a Sunday night in my dorm room, and it was the baseball coach at Cornerstone University in Grand Rapids, Michigan, in the Lower Peninsula. He said, "Hey, Steve, you want to come down here and on a baseball scholarship?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I do." And so I packed up my car that night, and I left about, I don't know, probably 11 o'clock or so, because he told me, he says, the only thing you got to do is you got to show up in Grand Rapids on Monday morning for orientation. And so I remember arriving Monday morning for orientation at like 8 a.m. and my car's packed full of stuff. And there started my journey at a 4-year Christian university, Cornerstone University, to play baseball. And so I guess my life has always kind of taken me into weird little twists and turns, and I learned pretty early on to go with the punches with things and to be led in different directions, and then to not be afraid, when you have opportunities that pop up. So I spent 4 years at Cornerstone University, ended up becoming a science teacher, and spent about 7 years in the classroom. And I became an administrator at 28 years old, a high school principal. Never intended to become a high school principal that early out of my life, or an administrator in general. But I had an opportunity, and my superintendent at the time, because the school was cutting budgets and realigning their administrative staff, they said, we're going to put you in the high school office next year. And I said, man, Don Chucky was the guy. He's my mentor. I love Don Chucky. Um, he said, Steve, you're going to be in the office next year. And I said, Don, you don't want me in the office. I said, if you're going to be an administrator, you got to be a politician to some degree, to sorts. And I said, I can't do that, Don. I'm not a politician. He says, that's exactly why I want you in that position. So I spent 4 years at that school, which happened to be my home school. So how weird is that, being the high school principal and supervisor of teachers that actually taught you in school?
Wow, yeah.
And yeah, but it was very rewarding too, because it was my home community, and it was an opportunity for me to give back. And they helped build me as an administrator, throughout my career. And then I left for another district in Michigan and spent 4 years there. And then I just had a bug. I was operating a TV show at the time, called Maximum Outdoors TV. We were on Sportsman Channel and Pursuit Channel, and I was trying to do the administrator thing and still film for the show. And it got to be really, really tough, traveling and filming and then hustling back to work. And I decided I needed to work and play in the same neighborhood. So it took me about 2 years, and I identified a place in southern Iowa, that kind of a general area that I wanted to live in, and picked up the family and headed to southern Iowa. And I spent 8 years as the high school principal at Abel Blakesburg Fremont. The show ended up going away about 3 years ago. We were almost 10 years on the air. My kids were getting older at that time, getting ready to leave high school. And I started having some thoughts about, okay, what do I want to do next? Because, I kind of feel like high school administrators age like dogs. Every 1 year for a administrators like 7 years. Isn't that the ratio with dogs or something?
Yeah.
But I think it's like 1 to 3. But I start to feel it, hardcore. And I'm like, there's more to life than sitting in the office here. And felt like I did some really good things, but there's some other things I want to do in my life. And my kids kind of graduated from high school and moved on to college, and then I decided to start making plans to move on myself. And here I am today. Is I think June will be my 1 year anniversary as a full-time Arrowhead rural real estate agent.
Cool, man. Awesome. I appreciate that. That's a good Cliff Notes version, and we're going to dive off into some of that. So tell me, what was it like growing up in the state of Michigan, and how did you get exposed to the outdoors? Was it early in life, later in life? Was it a family trip up to the UP? I mean, what was it like growing up there and the outdoor lifestyle culture?
Yeah, it was very early on, so it definitely wasn't later in life. There's certain people that everybody has got a story about, that happens to be the person that was the local. I say local legend just so you could connect with my story. But there was just those old school guys that happened to be hunters, and really at that point in time it was bow hunters. There wasn't a lot of people that were more bow hunting, and in a given area, you may have one or two people that do that. And my father was one of them. I could remember him in the backyard shooting his old Allen bow. And there's a lot of people in your audience that probably don't know what an Allen bow is, but I would encourage you to go look at it, but it was a wooden riser bow. And so I had my bow and arrows that I was shooting that were recurves, and my dad had this fancy compound bow that was called an Allen. And I remember him shooting it about every night, and we would shoot into hay bales with paper plate targets, and my dad was a good shot. He would always shoot a deer every year with his bow and arrow. I remember the one year his his bow cracked in his hand. He's at full draw in the backyard, and this riser just cracks in his hand. Of course, the cables come off of the wheels and everything, and I'm like, wow, that bow's made out of wood. That's kind of a crazy thing, but that was my dad, and so I'm going to tell you this, and I'm not going to say I really recommend this with your kids, getting them into the outdoors, but my dad was hardcore deer hunter, and so what came to the shotgun hunting. He would take me into a place in the thumb of Michigan called the Minnan City State Bog. It was 7 square miles of a peat moss bog, just littered with tamarack trees. About as beautiful a place as you can imagine, but it was not the place really to take a 10 or 11 or 12-year-old kid back to start them hunting. We would walk an hour back into our location. I remember having rubber boots, and you might as well wear shoes because you were over your rubber boots all the time. The backpack that we had to take to our stand, after our hour walk back in, was a knapsack that my mom sewed at the house. And I remember it would look like Santa Claus's toy sack, where you just take the cloth and bring it around in the top and put a little cinch top on it, a couple straps. That was the backpack, and so here you are walking in a peat bog. And if anybody's ever been to a peat bog, you have what's called false bottoms in there. And if you fall into a false bottom, you're going up to your hips right now. And that's the way it was going back in there. And it was hardcore. You hated it. I mean, absolutely hated it. And to get a deer out, you hated it even more. We would have to butcher them up and backpack them out. But there was just something about being able to crawl into your tree once you were back there and overlooking a tamarack marsh that really connected me. And once again, probably not advisable if you want your children to actually hunt when they're older, because for me, for kids, I think it goes one or two ways. You're either never going to touch that stuff again, or you're going to become a hardcore hunter, just like your father. And I think that's what happened to me.
Yeah. So you're obviously a hardcore hunter. Would you say that you or your old man was more ate up with it?
Oh, I think it happens in different ways. I had way more opportunities as a more new age hunter than what my father had. Because I had more opportunities. I've been fortunate enough to make a little money and to have some opportunities to run things like a TV show that offered a lot of possibilities for me. So I've been able to do a lot more things. But I tell you what, my dad, for as long as he went in and out of that tamarack bog, I got to tip my hat to him, because it was not in the day and age where you cared about any kind of recognition whatsoever from social media, from anybody else. He was doing it strictly because it was the most purest thing that you could do at that time to connect with the outdoors.
Yeah, now
And
people will
so,
be hiking out in the bog just to take a picture of themselves out in it to say that they did it.
yeah, and Andrew, it's funny because I would have did that when I had the TV show.
Yeah.
I would probably do it a time or two today to get content for, the business page or whatever. Um, but that stuff actually leaves a sour taste in my mouth right now, because one of the unfortunate things of being in the outdoor industry is just been able to meet those personalities with people that's what they care about, and we've completely lost that connection to the land, and that's really what it's all about. And so when you think about those people that you never hear about, and I could rattle off 3 or 4 of them right now for you, that care nothing about social media, they care nothing about any kind of notoriety, that's where I find myself now. I don't care about it. I want to be reconnected with the land like I once was, because that's where we feel, um, in my opinion, a spiritual correct connection with our Creator. It's the most purest form that's there, is just being one with the creation, and you can see the ways that the Creator has worked, and then when you start adding your telephone and social media and all this stuff into it, it starts muddying it down. So those
Amen.
old school guys that did it a long time ago, they didn't care about any of that. Those are the guys that I have the utmost respect for.
Yeah, man. I can relate to all of that. And I've been around some of those outdoor channel TV personalities you're talking about. And actually, I think I've shared this with you before. Um, that was my only reservation about you upon first meeting you,
I
when
remember.
we were looking at bringing you on board with Arrowhead, And I was just like, I don't know, this guy, outdoor TV guy, he's probably pretty into himself. I don't know if he's going to fit the mold, the culture, or what we're looking for. And as luck would have it, you're about as genuine as they come and as good of a dude as it gets. But not everybody's like that. And I'm curious, what was the turning point for you in the whole outdoor TV thing where you're just like, man, maybe I'm not driving with this anymore like I once was?
I could probably say that it was money. TV didn't wasn't wasn't lucrative anymore. I mean, that was probably more on the face of things, but you know, what's that song? I'm losing my religion. You
Mhm.
probably know that old school band. I felt like I was losing hunting. You know, I got to a point I never wanted to have a cameraman. I self filmed everything. I didn't want somebody with me, and so I tried that for a long time, and I did very well self filming. But you know, I didn't want to wake up in the morning and make sure that I had my three GoPros, and make sure that I had my Sennheiser wireless mics, and make sure my batteries were all charged. Like, I want to wake up in the morning and throw my boots on, and um, get my pack ready, and make sure that I'm going to be all set to just jump up in the tree, and just turn left
Yeah.
and turn right, and just
Yeah.
just enjoy yourself, and I think COVID probably did that for me, if I'm being honest. I can remember a few interviews I did from the tree in COVID, where, as a high school principal trying to navigate through COVID, I took a lot of this personally. I'm a conservative guy. I didn't like a lot of the liberal values that were being pushed on us, and I fought and fought and fought for our kids and for our school. To the point where we were recognized by the state of Iowa and asked to go on podcasts and stuff and explain what we were doing. But I did not. And at the time, our superintendent wasn't doing very well health wise, and so there was a lot of burden that fell on me and my team to push us through that. And I would jump up into a tree and just feel so much better. And I just remember some of those interviews on a morning. I could tell you the tree stand I was in. I could tell you the type of morning it was, and I can remember the interview. And it was along the lines of, this is exactly what I needed. I'm to get away from the school at those tough times, to just jump into the tree stand is what I would call therapy, and
Yeah.
reconnecting, and it just makes you feel so much better. And it probably got me thinking a lot about the TV show and how that needed to go by the wayside. It wasn't really a very lucrative business venture, anyways, um, but also got me thinking about other things beyond school as well. So,
Yeah. Yeah, man. What's crazy is you hear that all the time. Going back to COVID, you said that it was kind of a reset for you. And as horrible of a thing as that was, and what everybody went through during that time, it seems to be that for a lot of people, it was the reset they needed in their lives. And I wonder if, in God's plan for you, that was part of the reset He had planned for you.
well, if it was, I guess I would like to believe that it probably was. COVID pushed me to a limit as an administrator that got me to a point where it forced me to make a decision. I was done fighting the fight that I would call the good fight. I had fought the good fight for a long time, and a lot of that intensified with COVID, and then you get to a point where you just sort of like, okay, I fought long enough. I was 17 years as a high school principal. It's time for somebody else to take over. You can sit back and look and say, you know what, we did a lot of really good things here at the school and be extremely proud of everything. But it's not the way that life needs to be day in and day out moving forward. I could feel that relationships were deteriorating with people around me, and I don't like that at all. I think you know me enough to know that relationships are really important to me with people, and in order for you to fill other people's lives full of joy, I think you better have some joy within you too. And I was losing my joy in school, and so if God hit the reset button, He was like, "Okay, Steve, here's your last hurrah. We're gonna throw this COVID thing at you." And we used I used the model during that time is never let a good crisis go to waste, and that's what I felt like COVID was.
Yeah.
So we took those years post COVID and just kept fighting and making sure we're sending messages and working hard for what we believed in. But then it was time to move on. And so you're right. It could have been the reset that I needed. And I'm proud of what we did and where I came from. And I am extremely proud and ecstatic where I'm at right now. So,
Yeah, it's awesome. We'll get to where you're at right now. I want to double back to something. So you said you played college baseball on a scholarship. Did you play all 4 years in college?
I did. They actually, we'll call it 4 years, but our baseball program ended up getting cut my senior year. It's back now, and my gosh, they got a great program going now. But yeah, I played 4 years of college baseball. I was a catcher, and so my buddy Doug Wagner, he's a man that tramples up and down the mountains chasing elk, and I decided I was going to tag along with him in the fall to make sure my knees from catching all those years would take the mountains. And so far, I'm good. I feel blessed that after playing all those ball games, because you got fall ball and spring ball in college, and I caught probably 90% of them for we'll call it 3.5 years, because we did go through fall ball my senior year. My knees, thankfully, have held up. But even a situation like that, I was very fortunate to play college athletics, and not that I played big time baseball or anything like that, but we had the opportunities to play some good schools, to travel around the country and play. I built some great relationships with teammates that I still have today. Um, played against some people. I remember taking an at bat off of Matt Thornton, who pitched for the Chicago White Sox for so long, and I was so happy I fouled the ball off out of.
Yeah.
Nobody. I mean, he played for Grand Valley State University. I remember, it was late in the game and late innings. I ended up hitting one out that day too. I wasn't a power hitter, but I hit one out that day. He was off of their middle relief guy, and then all of a sudden their closer comes in, and I look behind the backstop, and all you see is about 12 different radar guns go up. I didn't know who this guy was.
Awesome.
And I'm like, well, we know who he is now. He's somebody pretty special. And of course, he mowed us down, and I was just happy I fouled the ball off on him once. And he goes on to have a great career, And here's the thing that I connect with the mindset of somebody as a high school athlete, and I hope that there's somebody listening here today that'll be at a point in time in their life where they're looking to make a decision on what they want to do post high school and get into college, and what opportunities were meant for me and what opportunities were meant for somebody else. The people that I played with and against, I played against some just as good of people in high school that never went on to play college ball because I don't think they ever felt like it was meant for them. I think they felt like that opportunity was meant for somebody else. Sometimes it just takes a lot of courage, and you can apply that to college athletics. You can apply that to your career. You can apply that to, the trip that you're trying to save up to go take. But that was one thing that I took away from college athletics is all the missed opportunities from people that were very good ball players that I played against in high school that never went on to play and had the opportunity to do so.
Yeah, no doubt. So I played college football, and the reason I played, of course, I enjoyed the game, but I didn't love it like a lot of the other people who are playing college football did. I always had hunting and fishing on the brain. And really, if I'm being totally honest, the reason that I continued to play football in college was because I knew it was the one sport that you just don't ever play again once you're done. I mean, once you take the pads off for the final time, you're not suiting back up, you know? So,
Right.
um, but I'm curious for you, was baseball the priority, or were you so ate up with the outdoors at that time that you were always kind of thinking about hunting or being outside? Because for me, it was really tough with football being in the fall and wanting to spend time in the deer woods, and knowing that that was how I kept myself sane and just connected with God and enjoyed myself and everything else. What was that like for you? Because I'm sure there's people listening right now in that stage of life that are outdoorsmen and women, but also they've got something else that's a priority right now. And it doesn't have to be a sport. It could be getting an education. It could be studying abroad. It could be whatever. What about for you? And what would you say to those people?
Well, I would say that we're
Guys,
never given.
because I tapped on the table on accident.
Tyler's going to get after you. You're not supposed to do that,
If you
Andrew.
see a hand just come out of nowhere and smack you in the face, it's because I've been a bad boy and I've been tapping on the table.
Right, we're going to have to give you oven mittens for the next podcast.
Yeah, no doubt. I don't know what to do with my hands.
What
Robbie.
do I do with these? What do I do, Ricky Bobby? No, I think that, we're never given more than what we can handle. So let's just start with that. Um, the moment that we try to take control of everything is the moment that we probably fail. And, we were given that passion of the outdoors or the passion of whatever else for a reason. Um, we're also given certain opportunities for reasons as well. It doesn't mean that one is exclusive for the other. We can always manage through and to balance our time. To make sure that all of our passions are fulfilled. For me, I can remember just getting out of practice early and going and hitting up bass pond with two of our guys on the team. And I remember coming back into the dorm room with a full stringer full of bass, and we were filleting them into fish, or excuse me, in the bathroom, filleting the fish in the bathroom right there. And I mean,
Most
we
colleges
just you,
allow for that now.
no, I don't think a lot of the colleges are down for that. I'm pretty sure it's a DEI policy that would be violated, but it may be coming back. It
What?
may be coming back.
Yeah, and do you? Never mind. I'm not even gonna go there. Uh, Go ahead. Continue.
No, I mean we shot our bows and arrows behind the dorm. People would yell at us for doing it. The campus security finally came and didn't allow us to shoot our bow and arrows in the yard at the dorm room. But just 2 weeks later, they come and catch me on my way back from a class and say, "Hey, Steve, we got a woodchuck problem. We know we said that you can't you shoot your bow and arrow anymore, but could you try to kill those woodchucks that are over there? They're burrowing under our
That's hilarious.
building." We're like, yeah, we could do that. So, we got our bows out, killed the woodchucks. Um, we would leave on the weekend. I remember in the middle of the winter, leave on the weekend and go down to my buddy's place and shoot a deer. Then this is probably admitting something illegal. Um, but I'm hoping the statute of limitations has taken place here, and it's not going to come back to haunt me. But we were poor, we were poor college kids, and we would go shoot a deer. We'd throw it in the back of my truck and park it at our um, apartment complex there, and it was cold enough it would keep. We just walked down every night and flay off some steaks, put them on the plate, walk upstairs, and go grill them up. And when Friday came along, that deer was gone. We chucked that thing in the dumpster, and back to Southern Michigan we would go to shoot another one.
Oh,
So I mean, it was, but it sounds gross and disgusting, but my gosh, I was living right then.
awesome. It
You
sounds
know,
primitive and I like it.
yeah, I think you find a way to do the things that you enjoy doing.
Yeah.
That might be a little bit of a stretch for some people, but the bottom line is you have a point in time in your life that you have opportunities, because those opportunities aren't always there later on in life. And as a um, somebody in their late teenage years or early 20s, and they're trying to balance things. Sometimes we haven't really been taught how to balance everything within our life. And so we let some opportunities slide, but we're never given more than what we can handle.
Amen to that. So tell me about the move to Iowa. What really prompted that? I know you spoke on it a little bit earlier, but specifically, what was that like for you and your family at the time? Establishing new roots, and then of course you had a love for deer hunting, and so that drove a lot of that. But tell us about the move.
Yeah, I had been hunting in Illinois for about 8, 9 years, and I just got tore up with big deer. I've had a couple of encounters in Illinois that if I told people that they wouldn't even believe it, but just in the game with big deer, and you get bit pretty hard and you want more of those experiences. And, um, I knew that I had to get to um, southern Iowa. I was looking at Illinois, but it just, um, the opportunities in Illinois aren't quite like what they are in Iowa. So um, just kind of got to a point where I was like, yeah, well, this is going to happen. We're going to go ahead and start thinking about this opportunity. I was doing really good at school. I had a wonderful school. It was Ubly, Michigan. It's UBLY, not
Okay.
UGLY. Ubly, not ugly. Uh, Fantastic school. Was the principal there for 4 years. Everything was going really well. But I just wanted another challenge, and I really wanted to get out there and work at a school and kind of be in the same neighborhood as these big deer were at, you know. And so, yeah, it took about 2 years to find the place that I wanted to be, and it took some convincing with the family to get there. My kids were, my son Caleb would have been a eighth grader when we moved, and my daughter Bella, she would have been a sixth grader. So it was kind of at that time where if you're going to move, now's the time to do it. The kids are young enough. You don't really want them to get too much older. Um, and so I just remember interviewing at the school in Iowa, drove everybody out there to interview. Of course, when you're interviewing and you really don't have anything to lose, you interview extremely well. It's like, I don't have to go here. I was actually looking at a superintendent's job in Michigan at the same time, but I had a great school that I was already at. So I really didn't have anything to lose. And I interviewed, I felt like I interviewed really well. Matter of fact, I walked out of the building that night. It was about 6, 7 o'clock. And I had been getting interviewed for like 6 hours that day, had many different committees that interviewed you. I remember walking into the car, and I got in there and I said, well, Melissa, you better figure out if you want to move or not, because they're going to offer me the job. I don't know why. I'm really not a cocky guy at all. It's like, but that's what came out of my mouth. I just felt really good about what had happened. And it took a lot for us to decide to make the move. And I remember leaving for my job in Ubly that day, and I was supposed to let this school in Iowa know by noon. And I said, Melissa, I have to let them know by noon today. It sounded like, this probably isn't something that's the right time for us. And I just going to let you know that I decided that I'm not going to go. I'll turn the job down. Well, she called me at like 11:30 and said that she took off work and went and spent some time with her grandmother that day. grandmothers always are the wealth of wisdom, right? So
Yeah.
she says, I'm ready to go now. So when they called, I took the job and we moved out here. And, we spent 7 months in a camper, Andrew. So, if you talk about the transition, I'm not going to say that I had everything dialed in, probably just like the transition from a principal to a real estate agent. I don't have everything dialed in. I didn't have everything dialed in. You just take a leap of faith and you have the courage to do it. And winners win and things are going to work out, So we spent 7 months in a camper, trying to find a place to live. And I'm talking about 7 months in a camper, like through the winter. Uh,
Man.
I remember waking up one morning. It was like minus 30. Of course, when it's that cold in a camper, you got to crack the the faucet, and let the water drip a little bit so it doesn't freeze up. But what people don't take into consideration is that sink has got a drain, and if that drain is along the wall of a camper, that drain may freeze up. So in the middle of the night, the sink overflows because the drain froze up. And I remember that morning, Caleb comes out of his room there, and his blankets all froze, like it had been up against the wall, and his blanket was all froze. And I'm like, yeah, father of the year right here.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh, man.
so,
Were
but
there any points in that camper stretch or just the transition where you doubted your decision to pick up and move?
no,
So it
no,
always
not at
felt right.
all.
100% of the time, you knew you made the right decision.
For me, it did. Yeah. I mean, you could ask other folks in my family that question and they may answer it differently. I don't think that they would, but, um, I don't think I look back at all. When you make the decision to do it, you're not looking back, and,
Yeah.
um, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And, you know, of course, as we've already established, I'm a little bit primitive anyways.
Yes.
So, I mean, it was okay. I think the hardest thing was just, you know, getting laundry washed because you don't have washer and dryer in the camper and you got to go to the laundromat so often. Um, but I made up for it because the house that we bought was one of the most beautiful homes that you can imagine on a private 400-acre lake in southern Iowa. And we spent the next 5 years, I think, there. Caleb was able to go throw some crankbaits and catch 5, 6, and 7 pound bass out of it, and beautiful sunsets and great swimming and great friends, and you know, um, everything worked out. So
Yeah. That's awesome. Um, so you moved to Iowa, you do the principal thing for a while. We talked already about COVID and what that kind of did for you and your mentality of being in the school system versus reconnecting with who you are. And so talk to us about when you decided that you might be interested in getting into real estate and how you came across that and what motivated you to push onward with that. Because everybody, what I find so interesting is hearing the different stories of people who come to our organization and like how one thing led to another to get them to where they're at as far as pursuing a career in real estate. And so that's one of the things I enjoy hearing most. So what does that story look like for you?
for me, it was the timing of my kids being done with school. So I had said all along that I was going to be the one to run my kids' school. I was going to be the one in charge of it. And so Bella was approaching her senior. Well, she was just a few months away from graduating, and I was exhausted. I was ready to be done. I knew I needed to do more. And so as soon as she graduated, I knew that I was going to go to real estate. And I don't I don't know that anybody really threw that my way. I felt like the everything that had happened in my life set me up to transition to real estate and to have a reasonable expectation of doing well. I was a biology guy. In college I was a biology major, group science minor. I was born and raised hunter fisherman. I I had it in my blood. I loved the outdoors. Um, I was able to be an administrator at a school for 17 years, which taught me the customer service side of things. Serving people is something that I get a lot of enjoyment in. Um, and I think when you talk about real estate, this could be a topic for another time, but I feel like, there's definitely some real estate agents that lose sight of the fact that we're in this for our customers. We're not in it for ourselves. And so that's the way that I was in school. I was in it for them. And sometimes in school, people don't know what's good for them. So you got to really press hard and do the right thing. But at the end of the day, you were solely focused on doing what was best for the kids, the teachers, and the community. So I felt like I had the customer service side. And then all of a sudden you throw this TV show in there. It's like, Steve, what looked like, something that wasn't a very intelligent decision to make, is to jump into the TV. Now I know I was self-taught on all of our video equipment. I did have a couple really good guys, Taylor Hurley, Billy Jackson, editors that we've had that taught me a lot, but at the end of the day, I was kind of self-taught on a DSLR camera. I was self-taught on any of our video equipment, FS5. We ran a Red in our production, FS700. I mean, I was editing up our photography. I had almost 10 years in the business where I've developed really good relationships with people that just happen to be people that buy and sell properties, and
Yeah.
or they know people that buy and sell properties. And then you add my exhaustion in on the education side and an opportunity to go do something else. It really is just a matter of, Steve, do you want to do something that makes sense, or you want to do something that you're absolutely going to love, chasing a dream, so to speak. And so it doesn't make sense for a guy that's probably 15, 20 years away from retiring. Doesn't make sense to do what I did. Um, it doesn't make sense when you've built a budget with a family based on certain incomes that are biweekly. Doesn't make sense for that at all. But who the hell cares?
Yeah.
It's like at the end of the day, is that the stuff that's going to matter? Because everything should get figured out along the way. And it made sense to me because of everything that I reflected on that I did in my life. I never felt like it was ever going to lead me to real estate. But that's exactly where it was leading me, is to real estate. I'm not your guy that's going to jump into, your 3-level home and tell you about the nice double door refrigerator and the nice backyard. I'm the guy that's going to tell you about the farm that pitches down beautifully during the first week of November, and you're going to kill the biggest deer in that section. That's what I know. And so by being here in Southern Iowa, I feel like, okay, I did it because of the TV show, but honestly, I did it for the next step in my life, which is jumping into rural real estate.
Yeah, man. That's awesome. What would you say? Sorry, I was thinking about a few different things there. What would you say has been the most fulfilling thing so far being in the real estate business?
Just making people happy. The very first national sales meeting that we had with Arrowhead Land Company, I was on my way home and had a guy from Maryland call me, and he said, "Steve, I'm looking for property in Iowa. It's a small acreage, but I need it to be a beautiful building spot, and I need to kill booners on it too." I'm like, "Man, you're talking about a pretty tall task." But he says, I'm here in Cancun with my wife. We're spending a lot of time here, and our daughter has passed away. She was 19 years old. She got sick. We have tried to overcome that, and we know that we need to start a new life. And so, they couldn't go back to their hometown. Everything reminded them of their daughter. And so I felt extremely honored to get the phone call, and I felt even more honored to find them some property pretty quick. We found them 15 acres, and they're currently building an absolute dream home on that thing.
Cool.
And I think he'll be into it here probably by the end of the summer. But just making people happy like that was fantastic to me. I've just recently helped a sweet old lady in Illinois. Her name's Lucy Pierce, and she we just helped her sell her home that she was in for a long time with her husband, and her husband passed away, and she's living out in the country by herself, and I know her family, and they needed her closer to them in town, and so we just maneuvered a transaction to sell her home and to buy her a new home, and we closed all in the same day. And she had a lot of stress and anxiety and just a worry about things, and it meant a lot for her to trust me. I appreciated the conversations at her table to just reassure her that I've got you. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to make sure that this happens. You don't need to worry about things because we're going to take care of you. We ended up pulling the transaction off. It was phenomenal. We got her more money than what we were actually listing at. We got her into a great home. She's happy today.
Yeah.
I sat on her porch on Halloween night with her just to go talk to her, because her big thing when we got her into her new home was that she couldn't wait to have all the kids in the town trick-or-treating. And so I showed up there trick-or-treat night, and it was like everything came full circle, but it's just like education. You want to serve people, and you want to make a difference. And I'll refer to this again. If there's any agents that are out there listening to this, shame on you if you put yourself first above these people. And so the greatest reward that we get is not in our check and the commission. It's in the value that we get in serving other people. Absolutely, we've got to make money along the way. It's our job, but our priority is people. And so those are the first things that's happened to me right off the bat that really just solidified that I'm in the right place. And on a personal note too, because you've got nice things like that have taken place, but you always want to know that you belong in an area like this space. Like I haven't been a real estate agent, and so I've always kind of questioned myself, like, Steve, you belong in this space, especially in Southern Iowa, where you'll know more than I do, Andrew, but Southern Iowa is super competitive with recreational property, rural real estate. And so we've got some really great agents here. And the other satisfying thing that's happened is we had the opportunity to sell a farm that was listed with another brokerage twice, and they couldn't get that doggone thing sold. And we had that sucker sold in 6 days once we got it listed.
Yeah, buddy.
And so that was very satisfying. And that was kind of the thing that led me to believe that, yeah, I think I belong here.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, you definitely belong in this business, man. You're doing a phenomenal job, not even being a year in of doing it full time. And I know that because I interact with you a ton, and you're doing great. So what's been the hardest part of being in the real estate business? Like for those who were, maybe they're sitting in your seat where you were at, they've got another job, another gig, they're wanting to plunge into real estate, but man, they're just a little uneasy about some of the uncertainties that come along with the business, some of the challenges. What have been some of your challenges that these people maybe need to think about as they're making their consideration to get into the business?
Yeah, I think the initial challenge is setting aside the amount of time that's needed to pass the initial course. So, that's a real thing, is to actually get your license. It's not easy, so you need to carve out the time to do it. It's I think 130-hour course to do it. And that I mentioned that because the next thing is connected right to it, as far as it's just like anything else in life. When you get a degree from things, they don't always teach you everything that happens in the trenches. So for me, one of the hardest things has been just learning on the fly the things that never get taught to you in any kind of a real estate course or in your training. That's why you have great mentors like Andrew, and I'm going to mention Dougie Fresh, Dougie Smalls, Doug Wagner from Western Kansas has been my mentor since I've started. So, um, that's been a big challenge, is just navigating the unknown. But I think people just need to be able to have their support network that they go to and use it. And I don't care if that's real estate or anything else. You have to be strong enough to ask for help. Um, don't be dumb enough not to ask for help. So there's every transaction's a little bit different. I think every transaction has had something weird come up, and we've had to navigate through those things. And so that's where that support network helps you out. But
Yeah.
the other thing too is no, go ahead, Andrew.
I was just gonna say, I love when I get the comment like, "Man, I'm looking forward to getting an easy deal or getting an easier deal." And you've probably heard me say this. I'm like, there are no easy deals. None of them come easy.
No, and I think just the moment that it feels like it's easy is the moment that you haven't thought far enough ahead, Andrew. So I think that's a good thing for new agents to take note of too. Is don't be just thinking about what's happening in the here and now. Like, think ahead. You know, you coach in football. I coached football for a long time. Played football. You can't be just thinking about the next play. You got to be thinking 3 or 4 plays ahead. And so I think good real estate agents do that. I think that's where you're going to be the best prepared. Teachers the same way. You don't have to know everything that the kids know. You just have to know it a day ahead of time.
Yeah.
From what the kids know. So you got to plan ahead. So yeah, there's usually no easy deals, and just about the time it gets easy, it's going to blow up in your face. And just so you need to be prepared with that.
Yeah. So financially, it's not an easy business to get into, and you've had a chance to leave willingly a good, high-paying job and step into this real estate thing full time, where no paycheck's guaranteed, and if you want to make something of yourself, you better be ready to invest in yourself as well. And I know that's a barrier of entry for a lot of people, or a barrier to entry. So what about those people? And I'm curious, Steve, because you didn't jump right away. It took you a little bit of time, but not long at all in comparison to most people. What about those people sitting there? Because this is something I hear a lot of times too, is like, well, if I could just replace my income, then I would go full time. Or if I could just make this much money, then I would go full time. Or, man, I'll do that once I'm full time. I mean,
Yeah.
my experience has been that those people saying those types of things, they never really make the jump majority of the time. So what about you?
Well, my quick answer was going to be is they're not going to be very good real estate agents, because there's never going to be the right time for you to go. And if you're always waiting for the right time, it means that you probably have one foot in another set of waters and you're never fully committed. And if this is going to work, you need to be fully committed, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Um, I think back to, well, I want to mention this too before I get into this next little piece here, but I didn't make the jump right away because of my commitment to school. I never wanted to leave my school or community hanging, and so I was probably ready to go, but I didn't want to let people down. And so I hung on until June and then made that full-time jump, which means that I had my license for about 8 months at that point, so but when I made the jump, I was ready to, like, I'm ready to not be in this house anymore. I'm ready to, go back to shooting deer and throwing them in the back of my truck and carving steaks off if I have to,
Yeah.
because, when it comes down to it, you win, like, if you can survive or not. I feel like no matter what happens to me, I can survive. That's just my mentality. And so it can get bad. And I'm okay with it getting bad because I know at the end of this, I've got faith that things are going to go well. I've got the courage to um, kind of step into something that's maybe a little blind to me and still feel like everything's going to go well. Here's what I want to say to people: you're never prepared for your next step in your life. I don't, please tell me, and please tell me somebody that's absolutely prepared for what's coming at them next. You know, left high school, I wasn't prepared to go to college. I just wasn't. I wasn't prepared to go play against collegiate athletes. My biology professor projected me to his biology lab assistant when I was a sophomore in college. And I spent 3 years being a biology lab assistant teaching college kids. So we had a lab Wednesday nights and I was the one teaching it. He wasn't even there. I wasn't prepared for that. You know, and when I left school, I was prepared to be a teacher. I wasn't prepared to be an administrator. I wasn't prepared to be a high school baseball, football coach. And I certainly wasn't prepared to be a real estate agent. You know, the real estate side of things is probably fresh enough to be determined, but I can tell you that everything else that I did in my life that I wasn't prepared for, I won. And I'm thankful that things worked out that way, but there was really never a choice. I was gonna win. And you do whatever you can to win. And I feel like we're all in that position in our life where we're not prepared for what's next. And it just takes a lot of courage and a lot of faith. And I think if you have that intestinal fortitude about yourself to know what you're made of, then you've got exactly what you need to do anything in your life.
Amen, dude. And I think something you didn't say, but I know about you from what you've shared on this podcast, but also just through our conversations and interactions since you've joined the team here. But I mean, you burn the ships, man, like in each chapter of your life, each one of those transitions you were just talking about. I really feel as if you move forward without looking back, without thinking, oh, well, I could go back to that if I needed to. I mean, you burn the boats and you're looking straight ahead and saying, well, this is the new chapter. This is it. We're not going back to the old one. And I think some people, they try to make that leap of faith, and it is a leap of faith for them, but they also know that they've got a backup plan if it doesn't work out. You got to get rid of the backup plan. You got to just make it happen, to your point.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you know, the one thing that was really nice to understand about Arrowhead Land Company, and you asked this question a while ago, and I didn't answer it at all, and so I'm going to answer it now. Um, as long as you surround yourself with good people and you tap into the resources that are available to you, and you have a great work ethic, you're going to be fine. You know, when I was making a move, I didn't just move to Arrowhead Land Company. Like I was doing my due diligence just like I would with anything else and shopping around. And I don't know if you guys remember this, but we had a video call, you know, Andrew and Will and Steve on a video call in my office and at school. And just, I was probably more interviewing you guys than you were interviewing me. And that's the God's honest truth. And not only that, but then I had to see you guys face to face. I mean, at that point in time, I think that you were only into this for maybe a year,
Yeah,
somewhere in there,
was
like
that?
not even.
Because I was just replaying that meeting in my head. I don't know if we'd been in it a year or not. Because I, yeah, I don't remember exactly when that was. But we went to the little diner in town and had the interview there, and then we brought you to the office that was completely under construction. We're like,
Hmm.
yeah, this is gonna be the office, and
Yeah.
I was like, man, I think that whole thing went well, but you had a pretty good game face on that day. I remember like you were weighing your options of what you were going to do and where you were going to be. Um, then after the fact, you loosened up a little bit once you kind of showed where you were leaning towards. But I remember walking out of that like, man, I think that went pretty well, but I'm not sure about this guy in terms of what you were going to do. You were kind of a wild card.
So I got to tell you the story, and maybe I'm gonna um, bring up some memories for you, recall some things. But after that, I went back to Iowa. I spent some time with you and Will, and um, we were at the office. Of course, it was just under construction, but um, there were other brokerages that I was talking to, and brokerages that have been in the business for a long time. And so I had a pretty big decision to make. And I'm like, Steve, why would you jump to a new brokerage? Like, they're not even tried and true right now. And, just kind of getting going. And here you are in your mid 40s, and you're about ready to bail out of a 24-year education career, and you're going to go sign on with a brokerage that's just getting going. I mean, are you completely stupid or what? And so,
You're
like,
probably the only one that's thought that.
and I just spent a lot of time with this. And the thing that I maybe have never told you guys is that mentality that you guys um, possess to take and start up a brokerage based on the foundations and principles that you and Will have. um, that courage that you guys had. I'm sure it was extremely scary for you guys and your families to do that. Um, that resonated with me, and that may not have been, I guess, what would seem to be extremely responsible as somebody just as batshit crazy as I am, to go just drop everything and strike off on a new adventure. But that's exactly what I needed. And so I a couple weeks before I told you guys I was in, I found a deer antler off of a buck. He had a flyer coming off of his G2, like I don't know, probably 9-10 inches. And he wasn't a super huge buck. I mean, he's probably a 140-inch deer, but that flyer that he had on there, you're like, holy crap. Every time you saw him on game camera, you're like, he just got your attention, got you pumped up, and I'm like, you know what? He really wasn't a super big deer, but by that one time that chose to grow in a different direction, it made that deer desirable. There were people that were wanting to shoot that deer because he was just a super cool deer. And I found his antler. And when I found that antler, I'm like, this is what's going to happen. I tied a note to the antler, put it in a box, and shipped it to you guys. And I said, those of you that choose to grow in a different direction will be desirable. And I'm it, Steve.
Yeah,
And
I'll
so,
never forget that, man. I'll never forget that. Yeah,
so
I guess the only way that could have been better is if you sent the match set so that Will and I didn't have to take rotating turns with the antler.
I never did find the other side. You potlickers probably came up here and found it on me.
Oh man. Well, dude, it's been great getting to hear your story. You're crushing it in Southern Iowa. I couldn't be more happy for you and your family, and this is just a start for you in this business. Um, what makes you tied to the land? This is the Tied to the Land podcast. Of course, we talked about your upbringing a little bit. We talked about you in the real estate business, but like when you really think about being tied to the land and your family as well, what does that really mean to you? What picture does that paint? Tell us about that, and then we're going to wrap up here.
I'm not going to come off like I'm a big spiritual guy, Andrew, because I certainly am not a perfect human. And Um, I have things that I need to work on in my life too. Grew up in First Baptist Church in Deckerville, Michigan. Went to Cornerstone University Christian school. Um, believe in God. I haven't been diligent about church. I haven't found church very satisfying for me, if I'm being honest. What makes me tied to the land is when I step into the outdoors. That's my spiritual connection. That's what fills me up. That's my church. Of course, I love to hunt and fish just like everybody else, but um, when I think about just being in nature and seeing the creation, it's an indescribable feeling that you get that totally removes you from all the things that happen on a daily basis in our life that actually pulls us away from nature. Um, And if we're being pulled away from nature, I think we're being pulled away from that spiritual connection that we all get, because it's undeniable. If you're alone and you're in nature, it's undeniable. It's a definite connection. So um, for all the things that I probably should be doing um, in a Christian relationship, I don't do. Um, but I certainly get everything that I need the moment that I step in the outdoors. If I'm floating on the rivers in Paradise Valley in Montana, if I'm um, sitting on top of the mountain in Montana with Dougie Wagner, if I'm just climbing up as a 10-year-old into my tree stand there in the peat bog there, Tamarack Forest in Michigan, um, it all feels the same to me. So that's what ties me to the land, is the feeling that I get by being connected.
Man, I love that. I can relate to a lot of what you just said there, and I think that's what keeps me coming back to this lifestyle we live too, man. It's that spiritual connection that you get from being in the outdoors, and then for me, really the ability to introduce others to that as well. That's one of the things I find the most satisfying. So, well, man, I appreciate you taking the time today.
Can I put a plug? Can I put a plug in there for
Yeah,
Arrowhead?
yeah, give a plug. Do it.
Yeah. So here's my plug, and I don't even know how long we've been talking, but um, I just got to say that I've spent time on the business end. I spent time on the personal end with the leadership at Arrowhead Land Company, and I appreciate, because in my short period of time, I've been able to work with other brokerages, and I see some things in this game that I don't particularly enjoy. I don't think I would be very proud of it all. And I think that we have a point in time where we set a direction on where we're going to go. We're going to take the high road, or are we going to just do what we got to do to get by and don't care who we hurt in the process? I know that Arrowhead Land Company, because of the values that they impress upon us as agents, um, take the high road. They care about people. Um, that is the priority, is taking care of people. And I know that's not the case with other brokerages. So I just want to tell you and will and encourage you guys to continue to fight the good fight with that, because the foundation at Arrowhead Land Company is a foundation that can be built upon and move mountains. And I've seen lots of teams in my day. I've been a part of a lot of um, groups and within the atmosphere of different groups and schools and things like that. This is top notch, and it's because of the leadership that you guys provide. So keep hammering. We're doing the right thing. We're doing it the right way.
Man, I really appreciate that. And you guys all heard me trying to end the podcast, and then he wanted to plug the company. So that wasn't scripted, and I appreciate you sharing that. I really feel like what we have is special here. I feel like the people we have are special here. Um, there's no doubt that this is harder than I ever imagined, trying to please all people all the time, be on your A game at all times. And, we're normal people just like anybody. So you have good days and you have bad days. You have days where you feel like you won, and you have plenty of days where you feel like you took a step backwards. But all in all, I feel like we are trending in the right direction and trending in a good direction. We've got some of the most amazing people that you'll ever meet. Steve, you're one of them. Great, great guy. We've got a vision here. We're doing things in the industry that have never been done before, from proprietary programs to mixing it up on social media, and adding a little pizzazz to what is, I would say, a black and white business, in terms of everybody's kind of saying and doing the same things right now. And to me, it's really old, and so we're trying to shake things up a bit. But man, I just feel so blessed to be where we're at, and I don't know if it feels like we've been doing it a really long time or a really short time, but I'm just thankful. I'm thankful for the good people that I get to work with every day, and that we have here in this organization. I'm thankful for the incredible people who trust us in this business, our clients and customers. I'm thankful for the support of the families who put their arms around their mothers or fathers or husbands or wives who are agents here at Arrowhead Land Company. There's just so much to be thankful for, man, and I appreciate you saying all that. And this is just the beginning. The foundation's been laid, and now we have to build upon it. So I'm looking forward to the future. That's for sure. But soaking up every moment in the present, and being a new dad's taught me to be more intentional about that as well. Just really trying to be more present in the moment, whether it's here in the business, being a dad, being a husband, being a friend. That's been a huge goal of mine. So
Well, I'm glad to be a part of it. I look forward to seeing you build your family. And remember, you're being a brother too. You got your younger brother to watch out there. Watch out for there at the office.
yep, brother too. I'm one of 5 boys. I've got 4 brothers, and the youngest brother of mine, Matt, or as we like to call him, Capitan Mateo around here. Yeah, working with him has been really special. That dude is he's just incredible at what he does. I would go so far as to say he's the best in the country at what he does. And even if he wasn't, there's definitely not a person out there that takes it more serious than him and puts more effort into it than he does. And so I'm blessed to work alongside him. And I wouldn't trade it for the world. Well, I appreciate you, man. You almost got
Appreciate
me
you too.
all sentimental there. If we had maybe another hour to go, you might have got me to shed a tear or something. But
Right.
we're gonna cut it off. This is Steve Noble. Steve, for the people listening, how can people get a hold of you? How can they reach you? Are you on social media?
Yeah, I've got my Arrowhead Land Company, Iowa and Illinois business page, Steve Noble, Arrowhead Land Company, Iowa, Illinois. You can find me on Facebook there. Phone number 641-799-9012. That's my Iowa number. And my Illinois number is 309-331-5767. I'm on Instagram as Steve Noble, Arrowhead Land Company, Iowa, Illinois. And you can email me, steve.noble@arrowheadlandcompany.com. And if you go on LandWatch, you can search on there and find me as well. But in this day and age, it's not too hard to find people, right, Andrew?
Man, you just gave them like 10 choices, brother. So if they can't get a hold of you, they better not come calling the office. So,
Right.
all right, man. Well, this is the Tied to the Land podcast. I'm Andrew Schultz, and this is Steve Noble. Steve, we appreciate your time, man. Until next time, guys, we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.